sign that you need to conduct more testing or disinfection. But the hospital did not conduct that testing. And when I asked why, a hospital spokesperson told me the PCR testing was added to the management plan just as a recommendation from a third-party consultant. And to be clear, PCR testing for cooling towers is not required by city law. But city law does require that building owners follow the protocols in their management plan, even if they exceed the city's own cooling tower regulations. We asked health department about this. It said this didn't amount to a violation, but other experts I've spoken to, including an expert who designed the city's regulations, really disagreed with that assessment.
If the hospital wasn't doing that testing, what was it doing to make sure the cooling tower was safe?
Yeah, so city law requires building owners to test at least every 90 days for Legionella bacteria. Now, the hospital was doing that. But there's a second red flag we noticed in the hospital's records. There's this line graph tracking the power of a disinfectant that was being added to the system. It kind of looks like the graph you see for the stock market. And in early June, you see it crash, and it stays at low levels for most of June and July. And I consulted with several public health experts who told me that the disinfecting power was basically what you would expect to see in drinking water, which basically has no disinfecting power. I also reviewed data showing that the amount of disinfectant being added into the system went up about once a week. But what we don't see is the disinfecting power go up. So we can't say for sure what's happening here. Some experts said there could have been a contaminant that was using up all the disinfectant. But for sure, the hospital should have responded to these readings, and officials have not provided any record of a response.
The city council, Joe, is considering tighter regulations on cooling towers. What's being proposed, and will it be enough to prevent outbreaks?
Yeah, so lawmakers passed legislation that goes into effect in May that would require building owners to test their cooling towers for Legionella every month instead of every 90 days. But experts told me that more testing isn't a solution in itself. Building owners often have their cooling towers disinfected right before they test, so their tests come back clean. And testing shouldn't be done at the point of peak cleanliness, but it should be done to make sure the daily management plan is working on a typical day.
Will that be enough to prevent outbreaks?
You know, based on the records that we've reviewed and from Harlem Hospital, I think Harlem Hospital is a good example of why monthly testing might not be enough. The hospital's cooling tower tested negative just a month before the outbreak, and it disinfected a few weeks before. But the Legionella bacteria can grow within days and weeks. So the water management experts I've spoken with say building owners really need to monitor every aspect of the cooling towers to make sure they're not growing potentially deadly bacteria. And yes, Legionella bacteria is everywhere, but it is manageable. Just keep in mind that there are close to 5,000 cooling towers in New York City, and you can see them all when you pull up the satellite view on Google Maps. But only a handful of those cooling towers have ever been linked to Legionnaire's outbreaks.
So, Joe, one headline from this, the bottom line is that they were adding a disinfectant, but it appears that the disinfectant was not effective.
Yeah, that's correct. And if you look at these two sort of charts and the data side by side, you should see a little bit of a spike at least, but we weren't seeing any correspondence between the two.
Good. WNYC's data reporter Joe Hong. Joe, thank you for this terrific job. Terrific.
Thank you.
WNYC receives support from Columbia University, presenting the book launch of Sustainability Metrics and Management, The Path from Innovation to Routine, with an interview with the authors. April 6th, registration at sps.columbia.edu/transform.
It is 6:51, and you're listening to Morning Edition on WNYC in New York. When you listen to all of it today, coming up at noon, hear about the tools and techniques that can help you navigate your spring cleaning. Yes, it is that time. All of it starts at noon today, right here on WNYC in New York. 46 with rain right now. Rain till late morning, then a slight chance of some afternoon showers. Temperature falls to the low 40s by late morning. And then cold tonight. LaGuardia Airport closed this morning because of a deadly crash there. Details to come.
The Super Bowl of energy.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by GEP. With GEP Key, Agentic AI, and GEP Smart Software, GEP is at the forefront in agentic procurement orchestration and autonomous supply chains. And by Fidelity, a dedicated advisor can help create a comprehensive wealth plan. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benishore, in for David Brancaccio. The crisis in the Middle East has had a worse impact on oil than both of the famous oil shocks of the 1970s combined. That is according to the head of the International Energy Agency. And that is the backdrop for an annual meeting this week of thousands of the most consequential energy companies in the world, sometimes called the Super Bowl of Energy. Officially, it's called CERA Week, and speakers this year include U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Venezuelan opposition leader and Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado, as well as executives from Shell, Chevron, and even companies like Ford and NVIDIA. Marketplace's Elizabeth Troval has more.
Energy industry leaders are meeting at a time when war in the Middle East has caused a major disruption in the global supply of oil and gas. Dan Pickering is with Pickering Energy Partners.
We're in the middle of a conflict that's probably lasting longer than people expected, has taken different turns than people expected. There's a lot of questions about how will this play out and what's the longer term implication.
The energy world is at a pivotal point, says Atul Arya with S&P Global, which puts on the event.
I think what is happening now in the Middle East is probably the most monumental disruption in the world of energy in the entire history of modern energy world.
Thousands of people will attend CERA Week, shelling out as much as $11,000 a ticket. Carr Ingham with the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers is keen on hearing how crude oil prices will be affected by the Middle East war.
This is now shifting to a discussion about a longer-term price scenario that is much higher than it has been for most of the last 3 or 4 years.
The conference will shed light on how companies are responding to a chaotic energy landscape. I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. The FTSE in London is down at 2.4%. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures here are all down about a full percent, with the Dow futures down 388 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 4.44%, and that is the highest it's been in 8 months. 10-year bond yields are partly a reflection of what investors think inflation will be doing in the next few years. And with oil at $113 a barrel and gas up 35% in a month, those inflation expectations are getting worse.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Amazon Business, dedicated to helping businesses save time on office tasks and empower leaders with business buying solutions that support teams to focus on growing the business. Learn about smart business buying at amazonbusiness.com. And by Yubico, makers of the YubiKey, designed to stop phishing. It protects the accounts people rely on. YubiKey, powerful protection, instant access. More at yubico.com.
On Friday, the White House announced a framework for how it wants Congress to govern artificial intelligence. Among the areas it focuses on, protecting children, respecting intellectual property rights, and getting the U.S. workforce up to speed with AI. This technology has, of course, already disrupted jobs in many areas, but today we're looking at the disruption of all disruptions, AI as an existential threat to humanity. Every Monday, my colleague David Brancaccio has been checking in on these kinds of threats to the future. Today, a conversation with the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, or MIRI. Nate Soares is the president of MIRI, and he spoke with David.
So I understand this. Does the Machine Intelligence Research Institute right now want our use of AI to stop right now?
It's not that the current use needs to stop. It's just that the race to make smarter and smarter machines that nobody understands need to stop. You don't need to give up ChatGPT. You don't need to give up self-driving cars. You don't need to give up on the medical advancements. It's really just this race to assemble far more specialized computer chips than anyone has assembled before and do a massive training run where no one knows the consequences. It's only that part on the frontier where we need to be pausing.
Who would be at the table, right, if you convened people who would chew on this issue? I mean, it's not just computer scientists, as much as we love them.
I mean, it has to be politicians, it has to be world leaders. And in fact, it has to be international. You need international collaboration here. We've seen people start trying to shut down data centers in their towns. And, unfortunately, an AI does not need to be running in the data center in your town in order to take your job. If these AIs are running anywhere on the planet, they can have the effects that people are hoping they won't have. And frankly, we need global coordination.
So I'm clear. When you talk of the potential for an existential risk here, that's not hyperbole?
That's correct. We're talking about the type of intelligence that humans have and that mice lack. That is something that these researchers are desperately trying to get into machines. And if they do, we're looking at machines that can invent their own technology, that can invent their own infrastructure. The issue then is not that they would hate us. It's just that we die like any other animal where we took their habitat.
I heard a retired senior U.S. diplomat just the other day refer to the Eisenhower administration in 1957, knowing that atomic weapons could kill us all, embrace the International Atomic Energy Agency. That diplomat said we need that for AI. Would that be a model?
I think that would be a great model. AI computer chips these days are very highly specialized. They can be made in only a few places in the world using tools that only exist in sometimes one place in the world. And to train a new AI, you don't just need a centrifuge. You need an enormous data center that takes as much electricity as a city. It would be pretty easy to control these computer chips and prevent people from these enormous new training runs where no one knows what's going to happen. All we really need is the political will.
Nate Soares is president of MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute based in Berkeley, California. He's co-author of a new book called If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All. Mr. Soares, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And Nate Soares was speaking there with Marketplace's David Brancaccio. All of our existential threat interviews will be available every Monday at marketplace.org. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore with the Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.
Support for